We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph and Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 71a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that we can test a person who's mute by asking him about things of the summer and the winter and things of the winter and the summer and seeing if he understands and answers correctly. And the Gemara initially suggested that might refer to asking him about winter coats in the winter or asking him about linens that are normally used in the summer. But the Gemara said that's no proof at all. It's possible a person wants a coat even in the summer. Let's say the person has the chills, or it's possible a person wants a light linen even in the wintertime. Let's say the person is hot. And so the Gemara instead says, Ella bepire. Rather, what it means to say is we test him in terms of the fruits of the season and see if he understands what season we are in. Rashi explains, bepire she'enu mitzuyim bo'os hashah. We ask him about fruits that are normally not found at that particular time. Could go in Srishish b'mos hageshamim, b'mos hacham anishpula, various examples of things that are found again only during particular seasons. And the Gemara continues that the two dots, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. Rav Kahana says that Rav says, let's say you have a deaf person, but he's able to speak by writing things down, meaning to say he's able to communicate. Kosvin v'nosin get lishto. In such a situation, we're allowed to write and give a get to his wife. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Ma'ikol mashmalon, what is Rav teaching us over here? Tanina, we already learned that. It said in the Mishnah, Nishtatik, if the person is mute, he's not able to talk, V'yamrulo, and they say to him, Nichtov get l'ishtecha, should we write a get for your wife? V'hirchen barosh, when he nods with his head, Bodkin also shlosha pamim, we check him 3 times, we ask him questions to make sure he understands. Imamar al lav lav, yal hein hein, if he says about questions that are no, he answers no, and questions that are yes, he answers yes, meaning he shows that he has understanding. So then they can write the get and they can give the get. And so therefore, since we see in our Mishnah that by an elam, by a person that's mute, we're able to take his instruction and write and give a get. So the same should be true by a cheresh, by a deaf person who's able to communicate by writing. But the Gemara says, Amar le Rabbi Zeir. Rabbi Zeir said to him, Elam ka'amrit, you're bringing a proof from a case of an elam, from a case of a mute. Shani elam, it's different by a situation of a person who's mute. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Medaber ve'eno shomeya, if you have a person who speaks but cannot hear, zeu cheresh, that person is called a cheresh, he's called deaf. Shomeya ve'eno medaber, somebody who could hear but can't speak, zeu elam, that's a person who's called mute. And both of these individuals, they're considered like they have full understanding in terms of all matters of halacha. And Rashi explains, Elam Klamrit, are you bringing a proof from a mute? Shani Elam, it's different by a mute. The Kavan the Shomeyahu, because since a mute is able to hear, Harehu ki Pikayach l'chol devar, it's obvious that he's considered like a regular person with regular understanding. Avol Cheresh she'eno Shomeya ve'eno medaber, but if you're talking about a deaf person who's not able to hear and he's not able to speak, so ilav the yochel ledaber mitoch haksav beremiza lo mapik. If not for the fact that he was able to speak by writing things down, meaning if not for the fact that he's able to communicate by writing, so then he's not able to divorce. V'ilav dashmin and Rav lahavi adan, and therefore if Rav didn't teach us, it actually is a chiddush. Rav has to teach us this idea, otherwise we may not have known that idea. And Rashi continues, Cheresh hamidaber ve'eno shomea zeu cheresh. Again, if you have a cheresh, a deaf person who speaks but can't hear, that's a cheresh. Rashi points out, v'lo zeu cheresh shedibru bo chacham v'chol makom v'shvei l'shota. Now that's not the cheresh that the chachamim speak about all over the place and compare such an individual to a shota, to an imbecile. This zeu kepikeach l'chol devarav, because this particular person, meaning the cheresh that's able to communicate, he's considered a pikeach. He's considered like a person who has understanding. Kedektani behedya, like it says over here explicitly, Aval cheresh de Rav Kahana lo shomea v'lo medaber. But when we're talking about the cheresh of Rav Kahana, there we're talking about an individual who's not able to hear and he's not able to speak. And the Gemara continues, Umimayid medaber ve'eno shomeya zeu cheresh, shomeya ve'eno medaber zeu ilam. How do we know that a person who could speak but can't hear, he's called a cheresh, and somebody who can hear but can't speak is called an ilam? T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, V'aninka cheresh lo eshma, he uses the word cheresh and it says lo eshma, I can't hear. Uchi ilam lo yiftach piv, and it says like an ilam who can't open his mouth, who cannot speak. V'boy same, if you want, I could say another reason, kedam riinchi, it's like people say, why is the individual called an ilam? It stands for ishtakel milule, his words are taken from him, and therefore you see that an elam is a person who's not able to speak. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Zeira says, Ikashali ha kashali, if anything is difficult for me, the following is difficult. Rashi says, Ikashali b'had Rav Kahana, meaning this statement of Rav Kahana, that Rav Kahana said if the person is able to communicate by writing things down, so then that counts as communication, and we can give a get. So the following is difficult. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braysim, Lo yagid prat le'ilam she'eno yachol lahagid. Rashi explains over here, prat le'ilam, we're talking about she'eno chayev korban shvua al shvua sa'edus. This pasuk is talking about a situation. Generally speaking, a person needs to bring what's called a carbon shvua. If the person takes an oath that he does not know any testimony, and really he does know testimony. So it says over here, prat le'ilam, we exclude an ilam, somebody who's mute. He's not chayiv a carbon shvua. Meaning, im hishbiu, if we make him take a shvua, v'hirchin barosh, when he nods, she'eno yodeh, he nods that he doesn't know any testimony, and it turns out that he does know testimony. So such an individual in ilam, he doesn't need to bring this carbon shvua. Again, prat le'ilam she'eno yochel hagid. This pasuk is telling us to exclude an ilam, to exclude a mute who's not able to say out loud the testimony. And so now the Gemara asks, Rabbi Zera asks, and Rav Kahana, Amai, why should we exclude an ilam? Hayachol hagid mitoch haksav. He is able to testify by writing things down. As Rashi says, Hayachol hagid mitoch haksav im isel l'Rav Kahana l'chayev. If what Rav Kahana said was true, so he should be chayev a carbon shvua. And the Gemara says, Amar le Abai. Abai says to him, Eidos ka'amrit. Are you trying to ask a question from a case of Eidos, from a case of testimony? Shani Eidos, it's different by a case of testimony. The Rachmano Amar, because the pasuk says, Mi piyem v'lo mi pichsavim. It says that it has to be from their mouth. You have to testify verbally. It cannot be written down. Rashi says, Mi piyem al pi shnayim edim. The pasuk says, al pi shnayim edim. By the mouth of two witnesses, v'lo mi pichsavim. They can't write it down. Ya'idu bebezdin lo dami l'shtar. Rashi points out over here, they're not allowed to testify by writing things down, and don't compare this to a shtar, to a document, which seems to be testimony by writing something down. Because over there, by a shtar, they've signed it on that day. That's a normal thing to do, to create a document. But here, when you're talking about coming to court and testifying by writing things down, that's already not considered to be testimony. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following brisa. This is from the Tosefta. Kashem shebot kenoso legitin, is talking about a person who's a mute. Just like we test him, make sure he understands when it comes to giving a get. Kach bot kenoso, so too we test him lemasos when it comes to business dealings, ulematanos and gifts, uleedios and testimonies, v'lirushos and to inheritances. And so the Gemara says, Katani mio etios, it says in this Tosefta that you can have a mute who's testifying. That seems to go against what we just said. Here you have a situation where it seems a person who's not able to speak is able to write down his testimony. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef bar Menyume, Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Yosef bar Menyume says that Rav Sheshes says, Be'edos isha, when we're talking about edos over here, we're talking about testimony, we're talking about when a person testifies for a woman, the person is testifying that her husband died in order to allow her to remarry, and in such a situation, Da'kilu bar Rabbanan, there the Rabbanan are lenient with what kinds of testimony we accept. Rashi says, Katani mio le'edios, doesn't it say testimony? Sheyoyed eduso mipi aksav. It sounds like he's testifying by writing down. V'amin mipiem v'zen elam. It says it has to be testimony from the mouth, and this person is a mute. And the Gemara answered again, Be'edos isha lahasiya, we're talking about edos isha, to allow a woman to remarry. Di'akilu ba be'ed echad, karo v'shifcha, because there in general we're lenient. We accept the testimony of one witness, and we accept the testimony of a relative or a shifcha, and therefore we'll be lenient as well to accept testimony that's written down. But the Gemara continues, Vakatani Yerushas, but it also says in the Tosefta inheritances. And Rashi says, Uparchinan Katani Yerushas, Vakasal Kadaitach. Right now we think, Lohoyed al Yerusha, Shehorish Adam Yalma. This is testimony. The person is testifying on a general inheritance that somebody inherited. So again, you see that a person who's mute is able to testify. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yavo says, Yerushas beno ha-bechor. We're talking over here about the inheritance of his son who's the firstborn. And Rashi explains, Amar Rabbi Yavo, Ma Yerushos, what does it mean Yerushos? Beno didei, we're talking about his own son. Imratza lahashvos hazabechor ke'echor mibanav. It's not really talking about a testimony. It's talking about when the person wants to treat the bechor like anyone else from his children. He wants to treat them equally, and so he's distributing. He's allowed to do that. Mitoch haksav, he's allowed to write that down. Ulhachi nakat Yerushos beno ha-bechor, and the reason why we're talking about his firstborn son, dimlo l'shanos al mishpat ha-Yerusha shel Torah, because if he's not trying to change the automatic inheritance of the Torah, so lama lanu lidvar, we don't need him to say anything. Ha-Yerusha me'ileh tibol, the inheritance happens on its own, but if he's trying to change from what the Torah said, and he's trying to say that the bechor should not get double, that's what we're talking about when we're saying he's able to do it, mitoch haksav, by writing it down. But the Gemara continues, Katani mihas, lemasos lematanos, but it also says in the Tosefta, for business dealings and for gifts. And so the Gemara asks the same question. My lavli alma, isn't this talking about where it's just general testimony about business dealings and gifts? And the Gemara answers to that, no, we're not talking about that. Today we're talking about his own property. And Rashi says again, my lav di alma, aren't we talking about the hainu edus? Isn't it talking about that he's testifying? And again, the Gemara answers, we're not talking about testimony. We're talking about where he's giving instructions regarding his own property. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Brisa. Cheresh, when it comes to a deaf person, lo halchu bo achar mizosav, v'achar kefitzosav, v'achar ksav yado, ela b'metaltalin. We don't follow his hints and his signals and the instructions that he writes down, except when it comes to buying and selling movable property. Avalola Gittin, but we're not allowed to use that when it comes to divorce, and so it seems from this Brisa that the person who's deaf is not allowed to write down instructions in order to divorce his wife. That goes against Rav Kahana. And the Gemara answers, Tanoihi, it's actually machlokas Tanoim. We have a brisa, we have a Tana that does support Rav Kahana. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, or Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, B'med devar ma'amurim, when is it true that we don't rely on the deaf person to divorce his wife? B'cheresh meikaro, that's talking about a person who was deaf from the outset, from the time that he was born, he has no das. Aval pikeach v'nescharish, but if he was somebody who had understanding and then later in life he became deaf, hu kosei v'hein chosman, he's allowed to write it down and they can sign, and that would be allowed. Rashi says, B'med devar ma'amurim delo halchu bo begitin, when do we not follow the instructions when it comes to divorce of a deaf person? B'cheresh meikaro, that's if he's a cheresh meikaro. She'ein lo ksav yad shel das shelo haisa lo das tzalula miyamav, meaning he never had a clear understanding his whole life. And Rashi says, Ulakame parach, the Gemara further on will ask, V'keven de cheresh meikaruhu hare kanas b'ramiza. But if he was a person who was a cheresh, who was deaf his entire life, so even the original marriage was only by hinting. V'lo hayu kiddushin gemurin, and it wasn't really a full kiddushin anyway, so why can't he divorce? Umuki la b'yavim, and we'll see in a moment that the Gemara is going to say we're talking about a situation where it wasn't a marriage that happened on a dirabonon level, b'ramiza, rather we're talking about a yavim, we're talking about a brother-in-law, so she had originally actually married this individual's brother, it was a deoraisa marriage, and now it fell to this cheresh through the process of Yibam, so there would be a problem. That would be a full Kiddushin on a Doraisa level, so it would be a problem to divorce in that situation. And the Gemara continues, as Rashi says, V'cheresh meikaro lo, is it really true that it's problematic if he was a cheresh from the outset? Why don't we say, Kashem shekonsa b'ramiza kach motzia b'ramiza, just like the marriage happened through hints, so too the divorce should happen through hints. And the Gemara answers, like Rashi said, I be'ishto hachinami, if we're talking about the person's own wife, that would be true. Hacha b'mayaskin, and here what are we talking about? B'yavimta, we're talking about a situation of Yibam. And the Gemara says, Yavimto miman, so who's the Yibam happening from? Ilema denaflu le me'achav cheresh, if the Yibam happened from his brother who was also a cheresh, so then it should still not be a full kedushin. Kashem shech nisasa b'ramiza, kach yitziyasa b'ramiza, just like the marriage happened through hints, so too the divorce can happen through hints. Ella, rather, the Gemara says, the case over here is, again, his brother was a person who had full understanding, he wasn't a cheresh, and therefore is a full kiddushin, a full doraisa kiddushin, and that's why the divorce would be problematic. If you want, I could say another answer. Really, the situation was the brother was also a cheresh, but we make a decree, we make a gezerah in the case where the brother is a cheresh, because you have other cases where the brother is a pikeach, and therefore we say it's a problem in all situations. And the Gemara says, Yachi, if so, ishto nami, by his wife also. And the Gemara says, Yevimto b'yevimto michlafa. Two cases of Yibam can get mixed up. Therefore we say that just like there's a problem when his brother's a pikeach, we say there's a problem when his brother's a cheresh. But ishto b'yevimto lo michlafa, but his own wife, to get confused with a case of Yibam, that's not going to be a confusing situation. And therefore we say by a case where it's his own wife, just like he marries b'ramiza, we say he can divorce b'ramiza. We don't say that he's going to get confused and think that should be true by a case of a full kiddushin, let's say, for example, in a case of Yibam. But the Gemara says, do we really make a gezerah by a cheresh because of a pikeach? Do we really make such a gezerah? We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis.